What's up everybody, Soul here with a Final Fantasy Tactics video. We've got the Ivalice Chronicles coming out here very soon, and so I thought it might be beneficial to drop a tier list for each job class available in the game to kind of give you maybe some insight on what you might want to lean towards, utilize, and so on and so forth. Bear in mind, I haven't played the game yet, as in it's not out. However, it is a remaster, it is based off a prior game, my favorite game, and so we've played 2 iterations of that game before in its original copy of Final Fantasy Tactics and then War of the Lions, and so I have lots of insight on what I think would work for you and in general in the game, and so I'm going to give you my opinion based on that. If these classes have been reworked in the Ivalice Chronicles, we'll come out with another video and we'll check them out, but as I'm aware, there's really not going to be too much change and so on. That's my disclaimer. With that said, let's get started. First up, let's have a look at Squire. Now, Squire is the default class for every character that you can recruit in the game, and so they're going to basically start in this, of course, with the exception of, unique characters. They're going to start in this class, and it's going to be where you begin and how they can carry forward. This class is a fantastic starting base. So it's got some really interesting skills from defend, stone throw, rush, salve, you name it. Really good stuff. We got a nice cheap reaction of counter tackle. And then you have in its support abilities Beastmaster, which is really interesting and something that can be useful when you have monsters on your team later in the game. Of course, you got defend, and then it has one really important thing on it, and that is JP boost. Can't say enough good about JP boost. This is something you're going to absolutely always and forever want in your pocket, so make sure that you pick this up before you move off of Squire, or for whatever reason you have a character that maybe is on another job class and doesn't have JP boost. This is worth backtracking for and picking up. It is an absolutely essential thing in the game. Amazing ability. Now, every job has stat growths, and of course that's your HP, MP, physical attack, magic attack, and speed. And the Squire comes in with a decent amount of HP growth at 3 stars, 2.5 stars of MP, 2.5 physical attack, 1 magic attack, and 1 speed. Not phenomenal, and so this is something that you don't want to stay on for too long and spend too much time in. Get what you need out of it, that JP boost primarily, and then move on. With that all said, all in all, the Squire class is a base class. It is really important. That JP boost is phenomenal, and it would be ranked lower if it wasn't for that, but I'm going to place it in the D tier. Next, let's talk about Chemist. So Chemist is essentially the other base class in the game. Chemist is the starting route for your Mage class characters. If you want to check out, Mage jobs, this is where you're going to start, is with the Chemist. And the Chemist is phenomenal for so many reasons. It has access to items and potions, all the way up to X potions, Phoenix Downs, ethers, elixirs, you name it, remedies, it's all there. You even get an auto potion through it as well. And then one of the more important abilities you can pick up is Treasure Hunter, where you're able to move throughout a map and pick up items randomly, and you can find some incredibly powerful items. Now, another great thing about Chemist is that it eventually gets access to guns. I mean, outright it has access to it, but you don't start with guns in the game. You get them midway or later in the game, and so when you get access to those guns, you're going to be able to utilize them on your Chemist, and they do decent damage with 100% accuracy. Now, that might change in the Chronicles of Ivalice, but in the past iterations of the game, it has absolutely been a phenomenal choice for Chemist, and so Chemist is something that you can honestly truck throughout the whole game. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it though because of the stat growths. Chemist stat growth is not the best. It has a 2.5 in HP, 2 in MP, a 1.5 physical attack, a 1 in magic, and a 1 in speed, making it not the best class to level up in for stats. However, with everything you can learn in the chemistry, you will not be disappointed for having and picking them all up and utilizing throughout the course of your game. For that reason, I rank the Chemist as a tier class. Up next is the Knight. class. And so this requires a level 2 in Squire in order to unlock and use. This is a sturdy class, essentially a tank class, if you will. They're really hardy, really defensive. They can equip heavy armor, you name it. Knights can do a fantastic job. In an early game, they're going to carry you. You're going to love your knights in your team. Now, they have break skills in their action abilities, and that allows them to basically break the opponent's equipment or lower their stats and their attack, magic attack, MP, shields, weapons, you name it. And that can be very, very good for the long haul. And then it gets a fantastic reaction in parry, where it's able to mitigate damage using that weapon, and that is absolutely phenomenal. Knights do seem to kind of tend to fall off later in the game, but that's hit or miss. It really just depends. We'll see what happens with the new tactician mode in the game and how much we really value having a hardy, tanky unit on the field. With that said, Knights do have some pretty impressive stat growth, in that they have a 3.5 in HP, a 2.5 in MP, a 4 in physical attack, and a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. So there's nothing wrong with utilizing them to get some healthy stats when you're leveling up and growing. And so overall, my rating of the Knight is, I would place it in a C tier. Up next is the Archer class. And so this is a class that requires a level 2 in Squire as well. This class is really important for unlocking quite a few other classes, so this isn't something you're just going to pass by and breeze through, and it can do some pretty interesting things. Archers are phenomenal in early game in that they're able to get up and get good vantage points and able to hit enemies in different areas and provide good solid range for you. Bows overall in the game aren't incredibly powerful, and it can be a little bit frustrating in that the archer only is able to learn various charge abilities as action abilities, and so that gets frustrating because in past iterations of the game, aim or charge, whichever you want to call it, it struggles. It's not the best. It requires a lot of timing and getting lucky, and so I'm really interested to see if that changes in the Chronicles of Ivalice, because it's something that I think really needs reworking and or attention. Now, it's not too bad to put on that concentrate. Concentrate really helps out as a support ability, but to have to put that on to make a job work is kind of a huge deal. And so Archer isn't the best for its outright utility. However, its stat growth is decent. Its stat growth is a 3 in HP, a 2 in MP, a 3.5 in physical attack, a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. So it's decent in that reason. Once again, it is a prerequisite for unlocking other classes, which gives it most of its utility. Sadly, the Archer otherwise is just something that I've not been overly impressed with in the past, even though I really, really want it to work. For that reason, I rank it in the F tier. Up next is the Monk class. This requires a level 2 in Knight. And yeah, you want to talk about an insane class. This job has so much going on. It is unbelievable. I always make jokes. I was talking to a friend of mine. They were talking about the time I ran into a random encounter of all monks, and it was probably the only time I've lost a battle outright in Final Fantasy Tactics. This class is unbelievable. What a powerhouse, and yeah, I can't say enough good about it. It learns some really great skills in that you're able to restore HP and MP to your allies, those immediately near you, revive, you can remove status effects, and then of course you have great attacks, damage, AoE, and even ranged. It's phenomenal, as well as elemental damage. You get a counter, you get all kinds of really, really good stuff. Movement ability wise, you get that life font. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that can be nice to have in your pocket. But overall, monks are busted. They are a really, really powerful class that can do so much in the game. And honestly, it's hard not to always want to have a monk or two in your roster. Monks have pretty good stat growth as well, with 4 stars in HP, 3 stars in MP, 3.5 in physical attack, 1 in magic attack, and 1 in speed. The monk is an insane class that a lot of people pivot to and or utilize tremendously in their playthroughs, and for good reason. And I'm no different. I absolutely love this class. I fell in love with it when I was a kid playing this game. I loved it in War of the Lions, and I'm willing to bet you I'm going to love it and have a hard time resisting it again in the Chronicles of Ivalice. With that said, I would rank the Monk S tier. Up next is the White Mage or Priest in the past versions of the game, but this requires a level 2 Chemist, and this is your standard outright out and out healer class. It has access to all the heals, all the way from Cure, all the way up to Curaja, and then Raise, Arise, Re-Raise, Protect, Protectja, basically everything that you expect to see from a healer in a Final Fantasy game. It gets a fantastic reaction in Regenerate, which is always really nice when you get a nice regen when being hit. I love it personally. And then it gets, of course, access to a natural magic attack defense boost through its support abilities, Arcane Defense. And so this is a fantastic class that does a great job overall. It also gets access to a pretty powerful spell that's great in quite a few fights in the game, and that is Holy. It's a fantastic class overall. Can't say anything bad about White Mage. It does a solid job, and it's just what you would expect out of a healing class. It is the healing class. So its stat growths aren't too bad either. White Mage has a 3.5 in HP, a 4 in MP, a 3 in physical attack, and a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. Nothing to scoff at there. All in all, I would rank the White Mage a B tier class. Next is arguably the most iconic job class in the Final Fantasy series, and that is Black Mage. Requiring a level 2 Chemist, this damage dealing spellcasting class is nothing to scoff at. Black Mages melt maps, destroy enemies, and smack everything. You love it. You get addicted to it. You can't get enough of it. Black Mages are amazing in this game, and this game really serves them well, making sure they stay just as iconic as they do in any Final Fantasy game. Can't say enough good about it. You get fantastic options for spells and abilities, all the way up from your basic attacks and basic magic spells like Fire, up to Fireja, Thunder, the Thunderja, etc. You get Poison, Toad, Death, Flare, and then of course you even get a magic counter. Really good stuff right there. And then you get a support ability in Arcane Strength where it boosts your magic attack. Fantastic stuff. Can't say enough good about the Black Mage. This is something that you're going to have a hard time resisting in your playthrough, as it really and truly destroys content, characters, enemies, you name it. Stat growth wise, it's fairly decent in that it has 2.5 in HP, a 4.5 in MP, a 2.5 in physical attack, and a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. This is a fantastic class that smacks, hits hard, as I keep saying. Yeah, absolutely love it. I'd rank the Black Mage S tier. Up next is the Time Mage. So Time Mage requires level 2 Black Mage to unlock, and this is a caster class that is able to cast some fantastic support abilities as well as debuffs on enemies. We absolutely love Haste. Can't say enough good about Haste, and honestly, that's kind of where Time Mages go. You will often see your Time Mages just, they're hasting everyone and hasting everyone and hasting everyone. It is nice to occasionally get those stops and so on and so forth, and Float can be fantastic on occasion. Reflect's a little bit hard to work and can be a little bit niche. Quick can be decent. Gravity's not the worst, and it has times where it can be useful. And then of course it has a really interesting ability to use Meteor. There are some really interesting things, like you get a Mana Shield, which is a decent reaction for your Mage classes. And then you get, of course, Swiftness, which arguably is one of the better abilities available to Time Mages. It's a support ability where you're able to reduce the charge time of all magic spells, which can be a huge deal in the game for those mages that are casting all the time. And so that's really powerful and big. And then, of course, you get Levitate as a movement ability, which is phenomenal. Permanent levitation no matter what in the maps. There will be maps where that's really useful. And then Teleport. Teleport as a movement ability is phenomenal. Go anywhere you want, anytime. No arguing about it. Just get there and be done with it. Phenomenal. really awesome stuff. And of course, yeah, you can't say enough good about the Time Mage for that reason. I think it's a phenomenal class, and as a kid, I love it. I just had a hard time staying off of it. Haste is one of my favorite spells in the Final Fantasy series, and then you can, of course, teleport, which is just busted. I want to be able to go everywhere on the map. Height and terrain difference is such a big deal in Final Fantasy Tactics, and in any tactics game, being able to position correctly is also a very big deal, especially for those squishy mage casting units. So with that said, its stat growth is not the worst. It has a 2.5 in HP, a 4 in MP, a 2 in physical attack, a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. It's not the worst in its stat growth. I'd say it's about mid. It's got some very impressive, great skills and abilities. However, this isn't a class you want to live on. For that reason, those stat growths are not the best. Also, the JP cost of some of these skills are really, really high. You're going to spend a decent amount of time on Time Mage trying to get all of these things, and I don't think you want access to all of these things. I can't tell you how many times I've really utilized things like stop and slow, reflect, quick, you name it. What I find myself really just wanting out of Time Mage is that swiftness, levitate, and haste. Might be different for you. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Overall, because of that, it has amazing abilities, but doesn't have great utility in its own use constantly, and then its stat growth's not the best. I have to begrudgingly place this job in the C tier. Up next is another iconic class in the Final Fantasy series, and that is Summoner. Summoner requires level 2 Time Mage in order to unlock, and yeah, this is going to do just what you'd think: summon espers, or summons, if you will, to come into the fray and have an effect on the battlefield. Everything from Moogle, Shiva, Rama, Ifrit, all the signature summons you see in every Final Fantasy game, up to Bahama, Odin, Leviathan, you name it. Really, really good stuff. And its final summon being Zodiac or Zodiark, all depending on which version of the game you're playing. It's an amazing job class that is, needless to say, iconic. You love to see it. You love to see those summons hit the battlefield and do what they do. It is Final Fantasy through and through. Now, it has a decent support ability and that half MP, which is something that is really useful for summoners because summoner spells are expensive. Man, you're going to spend a ton of time casting and you're going to spend a ton of MP to cast. That's the downside of Summoner. Its usefulness, honestly, it's not as great in my opinion as Black Mage, but for some people it makes a difference aesthetically and it's what they'd rather use and see, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's talk about the stat growths. It has a 2 in HP, a whopping 5 stars in MP, a 2 in physical attack, a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. So Summoner has decent stat growths, not too bad of a unit. However, overall, this is kind of one of those hit or miss. You're deciding whether you like it or you love it or you don't really want too much of it. It's really up to you. For me, this is a class that I will use, but mainly for the feeling of it, the aesthetic, the nostalgia of playing a Final Fantasy game. I'm not too bothered if I don't have a Summoner otherwise. For that reason, I'm going to place this in the B tier. Up next is the Thief class. This requires a level 2 archer in order to unlock. And yeah, what do thieves do? They steal. That's what thieves do in every RPG trope, and Final Fantasy is no different, especially Final Fantasy Tactics. And Final Fantasy Tactics, they have some very important abilities that are huge for the game, and that is steal, of course, all of your different pieces like steal helmet, steal armor, shield, weapon, accessory, you name it. Those are absolutely phenomenal abilities in this game because there's a lot of equipment, arguably missable equipment, in the game that you want to steal from bosses. Even random encounters, you'll come across enemies that have equipment and items that you might not have access to, and this is a way for you to get it early and get a big advantage in the game before certain points of the story and or certain areas of progression. So that's a really big deal in the game. And then of course you get an interesting ability to catch. That could be really big, especially in game when you fight those random encounter ninjas and they're throwing very, very high tier rare weapons and items at you. And then you get Poach, which Poach is a phenomenal ability that allows you to get items for those furs and such off of the enemies that you slay, those animals, monsters if you will. And so that can be really, really important. Thief is nothing to scoff at. It has some pretty fantastic abilities and also is a prerequisite for some very important classes. With that said, you don't want to spend too much time on Thief within itself. It is not a bad class to spend some time in because it does give some decent speed stats in its stat growths, which I guess we should talk about. Let's hit it real quick. Thief's stat growths are 3 stars in HP, 2 stars in MP, 3 stars in physical attack, 1 star in magic attack, and 3 stars in speed. This class does offer some decent speed in that stat growth, as I was saying, and so you might want to utilize it for that reason, but otherwise I wouldn't suggest you spend too much time in this. Get those valuable action abilities out of this class and then be done with it and move on. That's my preference, but those abilities, once you have them, are so important. They're absolutely vital in the game, and for that reason I can't rank Thief too lowly because those skills are just so important. I rank Thief in the C tier. Up next is Orator or Mediator. This requires a level 2 in the Mystic or Oracle job class, which we haven't covered yet and we will here shortly. With that said, this is a fantastic class with some really interesting abilities. I don't think that it really is something that you're going to lean on or really want too much unless it's just a particular aspect of the gameplay you're looking to strive for. There's nothing in here that's really game breaking, but it is an interesting, nice class that changes pace and gives you some different strategic options. One of those key abilities is Invite. Invite is a way to convince an enemy unit to join your team, and that means like permanently to join your team and be a part of them. That's a really big deal. And then you get another ability that's really important in Praise, which is a way to boost your teammates' brave. Really important mechanic in the game, and so that's very, very big for your gameplay. You also get an interesting thing in Taunt, where you're able to infuriate your enemies and force them into a berserk state. That can be pretty useful. And I've tried to mess around with things like Entice, but I've not really enjoyed it or thought it was the best thing in the world. It has the Tame ability, which is a way for you to get some fantastic new units that are monsters, and so that's fantastic. That's great, and yeah, I can't say enough good about it in that way. As I mentioned, this isn't a class that you're going to necessarily always want. I think it's something that I always kind of pick up and play with, but honestly, just to kind of mix things up and to have something different in the game. There's nothing here that really pulls me and says I have to have that, and so let's take a look at those stat growths and assess based on that. With those stat growths in mind, you have a 3-star in HP, a 2-star in MP, a 2.5 star in physical attack, a 1-star in magic attack, and a 1-star in speed. Nothing special, nothing amazing. And so overall, this class is something that is different and interesting and a fun way to mix up your gameplay. But outside of the random inviting somebody to join your team and then raising your faith and or brave of your team or taming monsters, there's not a tremendous amount of utility in this class, and you're not going to really be jumping at it and trying to utilize it all the time. For that reason, I have to place this class in the E tier. Up next is the Mystic or Oracle class. This has a level 2 requirement of White Mage in order to unlock, and this is your standard debuffing class. Really, really fun stuff here. I enjoy this class personally. I really like to change the stats of my enemies and inflict debuffs. It's a fun way to play, but sadly, this isn't something that you're going to be utilizing all the time. In most fights, which we haven't seen tactical mode yet, but in most fights, debuffing enemies is more of a luxury. I don't know if I want to say luxury, but it's not necessary. You can kind of just blitz through them, go through your random encounters by killing them, and then being done with it. Now, in your bigger boss fights, it can be a huge deal to debuff enemies and to kind of control and zone enemies, but past that, it honestly isn't a huge deal. Now, you get some interesting things in like mana font in your reaction, where you recover MP when you're hit by a spell, but that's a little bit niche, and it's not something you can always control. You get a defense boost, which is not terrible, and then of course, you get mana walk, which is great when you restore MP just by moving. That can be really useful. Once again, like I said, that's a movement ability that's fighting for a slot in a position of something like teleport. With your ability to debuff being great, but not necessarily useful in all scenarios and settings, that leaves this class kind of feeling a little bit lackluster overall. With that said, the stat growths are a 2.5 stars in HP, a 4 stars in MP, a 2.5 in physical attack, a 1 star in magic attack, and a 1 star in speed. So it's not the best in the world. It is important to have your Mystic or Oracle leveled up so you can unlock that Orator or Mediator and or Calculator, something we'll talk about later. But past that, this is something that's optional, can be useful in boss fights, but overall is something that feels a little bit lackluster in general gameplay and random encounters. And for that reason, I have to rank this class as a D tier class. Up next is the job class Geomancer. Geomancer requires a level 3 monk to unlock, but is a fantastic class that casts spells at no MP cost. Now, the spell you cast depends on the tile that the Geomancer is standing on, but to cast that spell at no MP is pretty phenomenal. Now, the damage isn't the best, arguably, but each time you cast that spell, you have a chance of inflicting a status effect depending on what spell you're casting. As I said, the Geomancer spell is dependent on what tile it stands on. So if you're standing on a grassy tile, you'll cast a grassy spell, or Hell Ivy as it's called in the original game, and it has a chance to inflict stop. There's different spells with different effects, and they're all pretty phenomenal. It's a great way to do some decent damage, get some debuffs out, and at no MP cost. Of course, that damage is scaling off of magic, but it still is phenomenal. Now, the good thing that's interesting about Geomancer is you're also able to get into the fray and hit enemies with swords. I've tried playing on this job class in several different ways, using on Ramza, you name it. This is something I really struggle to stay away from. I really want Geomancer to work and to be amazing. Now, if you could have a way to influence tiles and turn them in different elements and whatnot, that would be amazing too. But that doesn't happen in Final Fantasy Tactics, at least in their original iterations. And so you're kind of limited in that way. And the Geomancer's usefulness may kind of fluctuate depending on the map. That's a little bit of a negative drawback. You do get some other interesting abilities in that you get a support ability of attack boost. We all would love to see that on our damage dealers and such. And then of course you get ignore terrain, which is decent, but lava walking, which can be really important, albeit on very limited maps. With that all said, Geomancer has some pretty decent stat growths and a 3.5 in HP, a 3.5 stars in MP, a 3.5 stars in physical attack, a 1 star in magic attack, and a 1 star in speed, which is nothing to scoff at. Overall, I'd say that the Geomancer is fairly decent in its use, in its utility, and its stat growths. For that reason, I would rank it in the C tier. Up next is the Dragoon. This job class requires a level 3 thief and is another iconic class in the Final Fantasy series. Now, as far as action abilities go, you're only learning the different jumps and distances to jump, and so that's kind of its thing. It does it no matter what, and in the same way, you're basically going to go in, you're going to jump at said target, and their timing has to be on it. Otherwise, that jump can miss. That can be painful. For me, I never really like in tactics games when an ability takes an action to use, and if you miss, you lose that action. Those are inherently things that I don't want to use. Now, you might love it. You might love the timing of it, and it might be something that fascinates you. It definitely looks cool, but sadly, in past iterations of Final Fantasy Tactics, the power of the jumps has not been phenomenal. And so this is honestly something that is unnecessary. There's other ways to be powerful in much more meaningful ways that are far less of a gamble. And so this isn't something I've ever really and personally enjoyed in Final Fantasy Tactics. Now you do get a reaction of Dragonheart, which grants re-raise when damaged and reviving you once if you're KO'd. That can be decent, but outside of that, the real ability that I think shines in Dragoon is the movement ability Ignore Elevation. This is something that's really, really useful, is there are maps where you can just get to really obscene heights, and you maybe even need to find a certain item or to kill a certain enemy, and this gives you a way to do it. You walk over, it doesn't matter if it's 20 tiles high, you just jump up there and you're there and you're on it. And for that reason, this gives the Dragoon some saving grace in my mind. The stat growths, however, really are just kind of good, not great. And that is a 3.5 in HP, a 2.5 in MP, a 4 stars in physical attack, a 1 star in a magic attack, and 1 star in speed. The overall, this class is iconic but lackluster. I really hope that in the Chronicles of Ivalice it gets some love and we see some changes, but as of right now in past iterations of the game, it's something that I'm not really drawn to and have benefited from too much. And so for that reason, I have to rank this class in the E tier. Up next is the Samurai. The Samurai requires a level 3 Knight, a level 4 Monk, and a level 2 Dragoon to unlock, so you're going to spend a decent amount of time in other jobs to get access to this class. It makes sense because the Samurai's ability is to draw out skills from Samurai swords, and if you get access to it too soon, you won't have many abilities to tap into, as you don't get access to all of these swords right away in the game. It'll be a while before you get access to most of them, and so it makes sense that you're not able to access this class right away. Take your time getting there is essentially what I'm saying. Now once you're there and you have quite a few Samurai swords in your arsenal, then this job gets to be phenomenal. Not only are you doing awesome damage, you can drain MP from your enemies, heal allies, and protect, shell them, you name it, as well as do some fantastic damage. One of my favorite abilities on the Samurai is the Masamune, where it grants a haste and a regen in an area of effect, an AoE. But this is really risky and dangerous, as when you draw out the ability from a Samurai sword, you have the chance of breaking it. That makes the Samurai incredibly costly. It's a double-edged sword, pun intended. And so when we take a look at the reaction abilities, we have Blade Grasp, which is phenomenal. It blocks physical attacks in a really big way, and it suggests, according to the game description, that it doesn't affect any or most all damage types, but range damage is included in this, and it does mitigate that, and it scales off your Brave stat. You also get access to Dual Wield or Two Hands, which enhances your weapon damage if your offhand is free, basically making it so that you're using both hands on the same weapon to do some pretty significant damage. And then lastly, you get the movement ability Water Walking with this class, which is very great for certain scenarios and maps. Now, the stat growths are not the best in my opinion. Samurai stat growths are 2.5 in HP, a 2.5 in MP, a 3.5 in physical attack, and a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed. That's not the best, and yeah, it kind of leaves the Samurai in a weird spot. The Samurai, in my opinion, is a phenomenal class that can do amazing damage, buffing, you name it, but at a very high cost. And not for quite a while in the game. You'll be at the end of the game before you feel comfortable running this class reliably, in my opinion. And with that said, I have to rank this class as a B tier class. Up next is the Ninja job class. And so Ninja requires a level 4 Thief, a level 3 Archer, and a level 2 Geomancer. This job class is phenomenal. Now, your action abilities are questionable. You're able to use different abilities to throw. You can then throw different things as in ninja blades, axes, polearms, tomes, you name it. This makes ninjas phenomenal when you face them later in the game or through the game, as in you have a way to get some interesting equipment when they throw them if you have the catch ability. Now, outside of that, Ninja has some very key things happening. And of course, the big one that everybody loves is the support ability, Dual Wield, or Two Swords, which allows the caster, or user, to utilize 2 weapons, one in each hand, and effectively strike 2 times per turn. This is an absolutely busted ability that is phenomenal in the game. It's highly sought after and is arguably the best ability in the game. Really hard to not love it. Now, you also get some interesting things as in Vanish as a reaction, which turns you invisible when you take a hit. And then also you get some, evasion with reflexes. And you get the movement ability, Water Walking, which sounds like it's similar to the Samurai's ability, which can be translated as swim as well. But the Samurai ability is inferior compared to the Ninja's ability, because the Samurai ability doesn't take you out of the water, just allows you to act in the water, whereas the Ninja's ability actually has your character standing on the water free of any penalties. That's a big difference, and it's really, really useful in certain scenarios. The Ninja has decent stat growths overall, but is considered a very strong candidate, especially when it comes to speed. It's the most superior class in speed as far as general gameplay, with excluding, Onion Knight, which we won't discuss. Ninja's stat growths are 2.5 in HP, 3 in MP, 4 in physical attack, 1 in magic attack, and 5 in speed. This is phenomenal stat growths for a job. Ninja not only has that phenomenal stat growths, they also have unbelievable skills to unlock, such as Dual Wield and Water Walking. Dual Wield being the penultimate of skills to unlock. And yeah, I just can't say enough good about this. As far as Ninja as a class itself to play on, it can be a little lackluster, and it has, really squishy defense overall. Ninjas require a little bit of maintenance and care to play. Great for stat growth, great speed, amazing dual wield ability, decent water walking. We love Vanish or Sunken State. Yeah, decent stuff. Overall, Ninja is a phenomenal class, and I would rank it S tier. Up next is Arithmetician, or better known as Calculator. This job class requires level 4 White Mage, level 4 Wizard, level 3 Time Mage, and level 3 Mystic. Calculator is busted. You can do some insane things in the game, as in create crazy numbers, values, wipe maps, you name it. It's absolutely phenomenal. But it requires a tremendous amount of setup and heavy investment. Not only are you spending a ton of time in other jobs unlocking them, but you're also going to spend a ton of time getting JP to unlock all the values in your action abilities. Now, you do get some interesting things, as in that XP boost and support ability, and then some people really love those movement abilities where you can move XP up and move JP up. Some interesting things there, definitely worthwhile, but the big thing that most people love about Calculator is when you can get all of that farmed, figured out, and under your belt, you can create some insane scenarios where you can have devastating effects on the enemies and in the map. if you're patient enough to create those scenarios and to get everything set up. With that said, Calculator does not have impressive growth stats. It comes in with a 2 in HP, a 4 in MP, a 2 in physical attack, a 1 in magic attack, and a 1 in speed, making this class not the best to spend time in for growth as far as stats, but has unbelievably devastating effects in its gameplay and your ability to impact the game and destroy your enemies and or content. Really, really powerful. With that said, I have to rank the Calculator S tier. When I say you clear maps and kill things and hit for massive numbers, it's not a joke. They are insane. Up next is Bard. Bard requires level 4 Summoner and level 4 Orator or Mediator. This is a male-only job class that is not accessible to females. Now with Bard, you can do quite a few things like restore MP, HP, all AoE, increase ally speed, attack, magical attack, you name it. Even grant, re-raise, regen, protect, all those things. And then one thing that I love about Bard is that last song, or resonance as it might be called, where you immediately set an ally's charge or turn order CT to 100, allowing them to act next. That can be really, really useful at times. Now you have some interesting reaction abilities in that you get magic a boost where it increases your magic power when attacked, but that can be a little bit niche and try to get use out of. And then one thing that a lot of people love about Bard is that move 3, allowing you to move 3 extra panels on the map. It can be really, really useful. Fly, or float as it's called in War of the Lions, is not the most useful, but it certainly can be. Overall, Bard has some really interesting abilities and does some decent things, but in my opinion, it's not the best. It really feels like a waste when you have a character out there doing all these things for your team that really, in most scenarios, are unnecessary. There's not too often when you really are just desperate for a Bard, those buffs or those different effects, and so I find myself not really ever wishing I had a Bard and not missing them when they're not out there. Not only that, Bard stat growths are pretty appalling. They have a 1 star in HP, a 1.5 star in MP, 1 star in physical attack, 1 star in magic attack, and 1 star in speed, making Bard one of the worst classes to stay in for your stat growths. All in all, the Bard is a miss. It has some interesting utility and can be useful, so I can't say that it's the worst, but with a heavy investment in jobs as well as JP, and to only have a decent or moderate effect, that move +3 kind of comes through as a saving grace. I rank this job class as an E tier. Up next is the female counterpart of the Bard, and that is Dancer. It requires a level 4 Dragoon and a level 4 Geomancer. Dancer has some interesting abilities in that they're able to drain mana from all enemies, as well as deal HP damage to all enemies in AoE, but it's very minor. You can reduce physical attack power of all enemies, magical attack power of all enemies. You can slow all enemies, and yeah, you can even confuse and reset the CT of all enemies down to 0. There's some interesting things in there, but overall, it's not the best. This is another job class that really can kind of feel lackluster and be unimpressive. Now, it is nice that they can equip the weapon Scarves, which gives them a little extra range to deal damage, and there is some utility in what they can do, and there's some fun to be had. I really appreciate having different ways to play, where you can take advantage of different scenarios and have some different edges in battle, but overall, the Dancer feels lackluster. There's so many different ways to build your characters, and staying away from and not utilizing the Dancer's job or action abilities honestly is not regrettable. You're not going to wish that you had it at any certain point, in my opinion. Not only that, the stat growths for Dancer are just as bad almost as the Bards. Admittedly, it is slightly better. It has a 1 star in HP, a 1.5 star in MP, 3 stars in physical attack, 1 star in magic attack, and 1 star in speed, making it decent at the very best, and that's being very kind. Overall, the Dancer is a class that is lackluster, has some utility, can do some decent stuff, but isn't great and is honestly missable. Hopefully this gets changed and we see some changes in the Ivalice Chronicles, but I'm not confident that's going to be the case, and I have to rank this job as an E tier. Next on the list is the Mime. The Mime is a heavy class, in that it requires a level 8 Squire, level 8 Chemist, level 4 Summoner, level 4 Orator / Mediator, level 4 Geomancer, and a level 4 Dragoon. Mimes have a unique ability in that they're able to copy their allies' actions. That can be very nice, and especially the fact that they can do it while consuming no MP. That's pretty great and useful overall. This is a little bit of a limiting factor in that you can't utilize this with unique skills like Mustadios or Orlandus. Otherwise, this class would probably be bonkers. Their effectiveness, honestly, it's hit or miss. There's nothing to learn here as far as action abilities, reaction abilities, support abilities, or even movement abilities. You just simply mime. You copy your allies. This is okay. It's not bad. There's some times when it can be really useful, but I think it's overall fairly niche. Now, the stat growths. The stat growths for Mime are surprisingly great. You get a 4.5 stars in HP, 1 star in MP, a 5 stars in physical attack, being the highest in the game, and then 4 stars in magic attack and 1 star in speed. Mime is really useful for that reason. It's interesting that that's where it's coming in, and so this is a job class you can definitely pick up, spend some time in to get some stat growths, but otherwise you're not really wanting to mess with it unless it just plays to your certain play style, or you figured out some kind of mechanic that you really personally enjoy with copying those abilities. For me, this is something that I don't enjoy and I'm not overly impressed with, but I do value those stat growths, and so I place it in the D tier. And there it is. That is my tactics job tier list. I did not include the Onion Knight and the Dark Knight as they are not a part of the Ivalice Chronicles. They might be included in DLC or later content. We do not know, and at that point I will go back and we will review them and past iterations of the game. They are broken classes that require ridiculous amounts of work, but they do equally obscene things once unlocked, and they honestly just devastate the game in tremendous ways. With that said, that is everything. I hope that this tier list is a benefit for you and helps you gain some vital insights on how to direct your characters, what classes you might want to use, or what skills you might want to pursue for your characters and how to build your teams. Let me know down in the comments what you're thinking. Do you like it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm happy to hear all of your feedback regardless. With that said, thanks so much for watching, and a huge shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you so much for your support. You make a huge difference in this channel. If you're interested, make sure you check out our link down below for our Patreon, as well as our Discord, where we talk all things tactics, games, and strategy games, including Final Fantasy Tactics. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. I wish you the best of luck, and let's have tons of fun playing the Ivalice Chronicles. Till next time, I'll catch you later. Bye.